resume which covers 50 years of my time in the business from college through retirement, which was about 4 years ago. You will note that my resume is only 2 pages, but it covers over 50 years experience from college through retirement. And I'll get into the significance of a 2-page resume. How did I meet Leo? Well, think of this in terms of networking. I have some muni bond money in my personal account managed by Leo's firm, Cumberland. And I knew of Leo via his one of his partners, Matt McAleer, because Matt does a Friday evening summary of the equity market and the bond market, and I'm an avid listener to that YouTube broadcast. And periodically he has mentioned Leo's name and the portfolios he's involved with, and I developed a curiosity of Leo and his methodology and his background, and I happened to meet him serendipitously about a week ago for the first time. And we got to talking, and one of the outcomes of our conversation was this broadcast today, and I'm looking forward to it. Networking is a really key element. Again, I'll get into that a little later. In the last several years, I've been seeking to learn more, personally, about active trading. Again, one of Leo's expertise as it relates to the stock market and timing of investments. Secondly, I've been focusing on personally learning more about the global macro environment, currencies, global bond markets, global governing bodies, the Federal Reserve systems of the various countries, etc. The latter entails learning about the global monetary system, currencies, commodities, alternative assets, and which would include crypto. I hope to learn a lot from Leo as his keys to active trading. I suspect that he and I will have an ongoing dialogue going forward. So it's been a pleasure to me to meet Leo, and I'm sure it's a pleasure for you to have Leo as an instructor. Briefly back to my resume. I started my career with Smith Barney. You probably don't know Smith Barney for a good reason. It doesn't exist anymore. It went through a series of mergers, and now it's part of Morgan Stanley. You probably know Morgan Stanley. I was hired to join the research department after going through a 6-month training program. And that 6-month training program was invaluable. I was able to go through all the departments of a sell-side brokerage firm, the bond department, the trading department, the corporate finance department. And as a neophyte to Wall Street, this was an invaluable 6 months experience for me. I was originally hired to go into the research department, which I did after that 6-month training. My first assignment was the metals industry, and I was a publishing analyst on the sell side, doing both company and industry reports. And I remained on the sell side of the street for 9 years. I had sort of gradually narrowed down what I was wanting to do ultimately as far as the investment business, and I had decided on the avenue of portfolio management, principally in equities. And therefore, after 9 years on the sell side, I flipped over and sent out resumes, and we'll talk about resumes too. And got a position with Equitable Life in New York City. At the time, Equitable Life was a giant insurance company, and they had an equity investment department that managed both outside money and Equitable's own capital. That transition to a portfolio management role was kind of an important decision, and I'm happy I made that decision at the time and subsequently. On Wall Street, as you go up the ranks a little bit, you will be given people responsibility. And one of the truisms is people are harder to manage than money. So fully expect in your career that you will be having people responsibility, and it's going to take up a lot of your time. Over the years, I've had analytical experience in the metal sector, broad-based oil and gas sector, the financial sector, the technology sector, including biotech. And I have also managed multiple different portfolios of various shapes and sizes. And I have managed an investment staff. I've managed trading desks. And again, this gets back to the people responsibility you will ultimately have as your career progresses. For all of you on the call and for all of you that aren't on the call but listen to the replay, I am open to any one-on-one conversation that you might desire. Leo has my contact information. And again, I'm open to any kind of conversations or try to answer any questions you have or give you any guidance that I might be able to impart. So don't hesitate through Leo to contact me. Leo gave me a list of 4 topics. I've already covered the first one. The second one, what makes a student stand out? And literally, when you think about what is school, school is a full-time job learning how to learn. And standard standout items would be good grades or progressively good grades, being articulate, have good grammar and the ability to think on your feet, and the proverbial intuitions and leadership items that you can demonstrate, particularly to somebody who might be interviewing you. Included in this would be extracurricular activities at school, such as this investment organization, the Student Management Investment Fund. That fund and that experience will make you very unique. It will be a real feather in your cap on your resume going forward. And it shows that you have kind of defined your interest as a possible in possible job search, and showing focus is pretty important to somebody who's interviewing you. Second biggest item is networking. And what you should do today, and I'm going to have a couple of to-dos that I will summarize at the end, but what I want you to start today is a database of people who might be influential in your life, and more particularly your work life. I've had a habit since day one of collecting business cards, and I've literally used those business cards. I keep a file of them. You can digitize them, of course, but having a hard business card is pretty important. So the idea of networking is, what is it? You may meet somebody in Publix. You may meet somebody at a conference. You may meet fellow students. Start a conversation with these folks. You never know what their backgrounds are, how they may be in some way influence your future life. Get names, numbers, email addresses for all of these people. Keep a record of them. Over time, you will figure out which of these folks are really important. Those folks that are really important, keep in touch with them. If only just a holiday card or something like that. And over time, you will develop a larger and larger network, which again will be invaluable in your career path, whatever you choose to do. So having that database, having that record of contacts is a real important asset to have in your personal files. The question comes up about this possibility of the significance of the CFA program. Just a little history on that. The CFA program was started in 1963. And a couple of senior folks at my original firm, Smith Barney, actually were some of the founders of the CFA program. So needless to say, any employee going into the research department or portfolio management department at Smith Barney, getting a CFA was mandatory. I ended up getting my CFA in 1976. My CFA number is 4,255. Today, there are over 170,000 issued CFAs, and that is not. And then, of course, many of those are worldwide, not just in the United States, where the program was initially focused on. Having a CFA isn't mandatory, but it's one of those things that is kind of good to have. Let's put it that way. The CFA program, for those that aren't familiar with it, is a series of 3 exams. Preparation for each exam takes about 6 months. It's a hard program. The failure rate in the CFA test is about 50%. So if you're going to be going through trying to get the CFA, prepared to be doing a lot of homework in extra time, particularly if you're working 9 to 5. It's not easy, but again, it's one of those credentials that can't hurt and may be able to help, and also will be a differentiator on your resume. Another question is preparation for the job search. If you haven't done so already, create a resume. Given your age and experience, a 1-page resume is probably sufficient. There are multiple formats of resumes. Again, you have mine as an example. You can go online and you'll get 20, 30 different opinions of what a resume should look like. Think of it as more of a teaser, sort of an introduction to you. And also think of a resume going to a department head or the human resources department. And let's say they posted a job, and that job posting is likely to attract hundreds of resumes. And therefore, how many hundreds can someone read in a half hour or an hour to start weeding down to a possible group of people to interview? They're not going to spend much time on it. So the brevity of the resume is important. The focus and the wording of the resume is important. Creating a resume takes a lot of work. Once you think you have a sort of a reasonable resume prepared, have several friends proofread it. One of the big red flags on a resume is bad grammar and bad spelling. Microsoft Word doesn't always catch spelling errors, particularly for unique words. So have your resume proofread by a number of people to be sure it's accurate and clean. So again, think of a resume as a highlight reel of your history, both academic and maybe personal interests, et cetera, et cetera. And also, again, with the resume, put yourself in the seat of the reader of that resume. Also, create a cover letter. Not all jobs posting, some of them may have their own fill in the blank as far as an application. And some may require a resume that you might physically send. And therefore, a cover letter is a standard item to have with your resume. A cover letter needs to be very brief and to the point, and be sure in the first paragraph of that cover letter, you focus on the job description and how you might fit into that job posting. Another item is a to-do is create a business card, get it printed at Kiko's or Office Max or wherever. A business card, in your case, would at least have maybe 3 items. Obviously, your name, your email address, and your phone number. A real important thing about a business card is it isn't in tiny font. Big font works, particularly for people like me who need reading glasses. You know, sometimes you see business cards with just tiny little things and they're all jammed up with all kinds. A simple business card is easy to do, make it readable, carry 10 of them with you at all times. You never know who you're going to bump into. You never know who you want to have a possible further conversation with. And again, carry them with you at all times. They're very useful to develop that network I was talking about. One of the other topics Leo gave me is how to start and grow in the broad world of the capital markets. It will soon be 2022, and those of you who are seniors will be looking for a job, whether that's a summer job between college and graduate school, or whether it's a permanent job just out of college. Finding a job is a full-time job. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time. Excuse me. By your focus with working with Leo, you've clearly chosen some aspect of the investment business. You may not know what aspect that is yet, but clearly you've eliminated a lot of professions that you're not interested in. You're not going to become a lawyer. You're not going to become a medical doctor. You're not going to become an educator. But the financial world is a huge world. There are many, many subcategories that you could eventually get into. Some examples, of course, would be private equity. There are lots of big private equity firms, venture capital firms. That's a whole nother sector. And on the buy side, there's, of course, mutual funds, pension plans. A lot of big corporations manage some of their money internally, and therefore possible job opportunity might be with, General Motors or some larger corporation that may internally manage their money. There are thousands of advisory firms out there. Again, Cumberland being one of them, Leo's firm. And they come in all shapes and sizes and categories of asset management. From the quantitative firms out there, the big names would be Citadel or Bridgewater. And that's the buy side, it's the money management side. Of course, there's always the sell side, the brokerage side and/or boutiques that sell their services for hard dollars. Much of the buy side does trading through sell side firms, and that's how they pay for their research services and other services that they provide. There's a huge number of startups every year, both on the buy side, and that includes little boutiques to firms that have other aspects trying to differentiate themselves. I had a friend who worked for, spent a lot of time down at Ned Davis Research, which is a sell-side research firm. And about a year ago, we had breakfast, and he said he was going to start up his own firm, which he has. So there's constantly startups out there. Just sort of keep an eye on those folks. The probability of a startup hiring a college graduate is probably not very high. The probability of getting in with a bigger firm is probably higher than it is with a boutique. The boutiques are generally looking for experienced people. But again, that job search is a full-time job, and having a good resume, having a business card, having a cover letter, all prepared and ready to go, can enable you to attack the job finding market. Historically, the financial jobs were in a few cities. New York City, San Francisco, Boston, not so much Chicago or Baltimore or Los Angeles. Today, the investment opportunity jobs are all over, particularly in Florida. And why is that? Well, New York and Massachusetts are high tax states. And employees get tired of paying high taxes in high tax states. And you've had a sort of mass migration of money management firms to the likes of Texas and Florida. Why? Real simple. No state income taxes. Another topic was how to pick stocks. Well, I'm going to leave that for the Q&A section because that's a very large topic and there's no one way to pick stocks. And I've got a few summary comments and then we'll take questions. So on your to-do list is create a resume, create a cover letter, get a business card printed up. Secondly, create your database of your now future budding network of people. Keep in touch with that network. It's really important because, when you think about an employer or a money management firm who's thinking about hiring a new employee, what's the process? Well, first they're going to ask the people within the firm, do they know anybody that might fit this job description? So probably half the jobs out there never get posted, maybe a greater percentage of that. Thus the idea of having that network. Another way that firms hire people is employing headhunters. Again, these would tend to be for more senior jobs. The likelihood that a headhunter would be contacting a college graduate is probably slim to none. But be aware that there's this job search function out there that is a professional function, and they're called headhunters. Why would a firm use a headhunter? Well, it's called time allocation. A headhunter is basically someone who will go out, contact possible candidates, interview those candidates, screen them, and maybe bring 5 candidates to the home office for an interview. And that headhunter may have screened 100 candidates to come up with 5. So that is one avenue that you can be hired by, but unlikely fresh out of school. The third avenue would be a job posting in some way or another. Now imagine a job posting. How many thousands of folks are looking at job postings? And thus the idea of one of Leo's subjects was how to differentiate yourself. What you're doing today is one of those differentiators. You want to get through that screening process, which may be less than a minute by that human resources person or department head. And 1 minute or 60 seconds isn't a bunch of time to try to really differentiate you. So you need that differentiation in that resume and clearly stated so it pops out at the person reading your resume. So key takeaways is another thing of which I haven't mentioned is that, and probably something you haven't even thought about, and that is that from this day forward, you are all salespeople. You're selling yourself. And you're also selling your eventual job mates You will be selling to potential clients. So the idea that there is a marketing function as distinct from an investment function needs to be part of your thinking. On that subject, if you've never taken a college course in communication or speeches or anything of that nature, do it now. Check your curriculum, see what's available in the way of public speaking or communication. It's no doubt for you guys an elective at this point in time. You will find that as you move up, your ability to sell and communicate is critical. It's not enough to just be smart and right. You got to convince other people that you're smart and right. And that's, you think of yourselves as salespeople from this day forward. A couple of words of what I'll call words of wisdom. One, it's harder to manage people than it is money. Two, a resume is not a multi-page biography. Max 2. One of the interviewing standard questions you'll get is, tell me about yourself. Well, don't take a half hour telling them about yourself. You know, sort of think of how you organize answering that question in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. You really need to differentiate between noise and relevant information. Different topic. When you're wrong, cut your losses. Also, from a career development standpoint, learn as if you have an equity focus, don't stop there. Learn a lot about the bond market and the options market and any other capital market out there. The broader base your knowledge is, the better you'll be accomplishing your specific job, and better you will be able to communicate. From a portfolio standpoint, avoid being on margin and rarely short stocks. And another thing from a sort of big picture standpoint, don't burn your bridges. You are highly likely at some point in your career to bump into some jerk that may work at the company that you're working at. And it's very tempting to tell that jerk that they're real assholes, and maybe in stronger words than that. You never know 5 years later where that jerk may end up. And he or she may end up influencing your life in some way that is not pleasant. So be diplomatic, don't burn your bridges. And always manage risk. And I define risk as deviation from expected return. Risk management is a very important element to portfolio management and your life. And let me stop there. I've gone over 2 minutes and just open the floor to questions and go for it.
All right, thank you, Roger. Yeah, that was actually very good. We haven't had a guest lecture like this comprehensive for a long time. Everyone, I have some questions already from the Cfa program. I like to just ask the questions first, if you don't mind, and then we can go around. You can introduce yourselves and ask some questions. Since this is our first recorded lecture, I want to make sure I can cover as many questions as possible. And Roger, if you don't mind, I'll start with some questions about career advice. First, you gave really a lot of useful information, and one student asked, this is actually a question I've gotten multiple times. I hear investment banking works a lot. Is it worth it?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. And what Leo's referring to is there are several job categories on Wall Street which are infamous for burning people out. It's not unusual expectation for someone who's in the investment banking world to be required to work at least 14-hour days, maybe 7 days a week. A very successful corporate investment person can make a whole lot of money. Your failure rate from a intern in the corporate finance world to someone becoming a partner at a firm is probably about 90% or higher. And really, that decision to go into that kind of situation, and corporate finance isn't the only departments that have those kinds of, let's call it work expectations. A lot of the consulting firms do too, like McKinsey or Booz Allen, which again is an avenue for all students. You basically have to ask yourself, are 14 hours a day something you want to do? Something that is necessary for your goals? But those kinds of jobs are out there, and those kinds of expectations are out there. So just be aware what that job description truly is and your time commitment to that potential job.
Okay, thanks, Roger. And I have a follow-up question here, similar to this question. How do you manage work-life balance, and how do you manage your time?
Well, that's again, that's sort of like the corporate finance question. It's up to each individual what their priorities are. In my specific case, I was married my senior year in college. So needless to say, I was pretty serious about getting a career going and getting some cash flow coming in. Eventually, I had 2 children. So that quote balancing act that you're talking about, Leo, or the question is referring to, it's up to the individual what their priorities are. And if you understand the rules of the game of the job going in, and thus you don't want to be surprised that it's not a 9-hour day, it's a 14-hour day. It's not a 5 days a week, it's 7 days a week. So again, you've got to weigh that relative to your goals and your aspirations.
Yeah, that's true. And I will just continue with a few more questions, and then I'll hand over to students. Another question is that this is also a career-related question, but it's about location. Roger, I know you already said firms are moving down to Florida. Actually, Cumberland moved down to Florida 10 years ago, and we all know it came down for the sunshine. Maybe taxes were also part of the reason. But one student is asking, I don't see many job posts in Florida. Should I still look for places like New York?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no place is out of bounds unless you have personally made the statement, I'm not going to work in Nebraska. You may have places you don't want to work. That's perfectly understandable. In a way, getting that first job, I would recommend you be indifferent as to its location. Getting your feet in the door gets you going. You can always move, not always, but you can, as per my resume, I've changed jobs. I haven't even counted. I'll say 8 different times. So changing jobs isn't unusual. In no case was location the primary reason for taking that job. It's desirable if that location is in a non-tax state. What my point about migration of the job market is that when I was looking for work, there weren't any I wasn't aware of any investment advisory firms in the state of Florida. Even after 5 years in the business, I still didn't know any investment advisory firms in the state of Florida. There's going to be a bunch of them. So don't rule out Florida as distinct from New York City or San Francisco or Boston, but don't hesitate to go to those cities. The old rule of thumb is you could always start in New York City, but you would never go to New York City from a different location. New York City is its own animal. I don't know if you've all worked there or been there. You know, cities are very different, and there's certain characteristics all cities have. People walk fast on the sidewalks in New York City. They don't walk fast on the sidewalks in Florida. Subways are the mode of transportation. There's no subways in Florida. There are lots of angry people in New York City. Maybe a fewer angry people in Florida. Anyway, there are advantages to New York City. Why? Because there's maybe lots of job opportunities, but don't rule out other cities. And the fact that sort of the business has changed from New York City centric to, literally all over is plus points for people looking for positions.
Yeah, Roger. I learned on the second day after moving down from New York to Florida, you don't walk in Florida, period. I'll have another question, but this time it'll be a little bit different. What's a 5-star fund? I think I just didn't think about explaining this. Maybe Roger, you're more qualified than I to explain this. Can you walk the students through what's Morningstar, what's 5-star fund?
Sure. Morningstar is a rating service. It started up maybe in the 70s, early 80s, which rates performance and volatility of mutual funds, all mutual funds, bonds, stocks, converts, preferreds, any mutual fund. And they have certain criteria in assigning star ratings to that mutual fund, and therefore that mutual fund manager and management company. Simplistically, their consistency of a record, volatility of that record, and the star ranking. You really can't even get a ranking in Morningstar until a fund has been up and running at least 3 years. At least that's what the old rules are. And thus, I was able, just through luck and dedication, to have, let's call it just superior performance. Thus, I got a 5-star Morningstar rating. 5 stars are pretty rare. And I'm really proud of that fact, but that's history. Now I'm managing my own portfolio and still hoping for a 5-star rating. One other point, Leo. When I got that 5-star rating on that mutual fund, there were about 800 mutual funds that Morningstar reviewed. I was in a category called technology and growth. Today, there's probably 15,000 mutual funds of all shapes and sizes. So at that point in time, there were relatively fewer competitors, but it's still the money management business is a competitive business. You need to have competitive instincts to be in the business, and that's, for me, that was part of the fun of it, the competition.
Yeah, I totally agree. You're constantly benchmarked and you got to perform in this world. And I'll ask one more question and then I'll give it to the students. So this question is that when should I apply for my MBA? Basically, I think the student's asking, should I apply immediately after college or wait till work for a few years?
Interesting question. I'd say either one is okay. Particularly, there are other circumstances that may dictate what you do. you may need some income to finance your MBA. So, getting a job may be just part and parcel of your career, and obviously knowing it would be a summer job, or take a permanent job, work at it for 2 or 3 years, and then maybe get an MBA. In my case, I went all the way through my program with only summer jobs, and again, my first permanent job was with Smith Barney. That was starting my career. There's pluses and minuses to going straight through, or getting some experience, and then getting an MBA. I went to undergraduate Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. All of our classes were also where the graduate students, the MBA students, would take their classes. And I'd say about half of them were people who had prior job experience and then decided to get their MBA. So there's really no one quote right answer to the question. Again, it's a matter of preference and circumstances as to how you fit in an MBA, if you do an MBA at all.
Yeah. Okay. This is perfect. I've taken up 15 minutes, and everyone, if you want to introduce yourself, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Let's start up with a gal up on the upper left, or at least my left.
Yeah, Tali, go ahead.
Hello, Roger. My name is Hitali, and it was very interesting to hear your 50 years career journey of where you started your work and you landed up managing 5-star fund. So my question is that how was your journey? Like, how did you manage managing 5-star mutual fund? So first you worked as an analyst, and then you gradually went up being the portfolio manager.
Well, just chronologically, I had 3 jobs before I got into the portfolio management business with Equitable Life, with 3 different sell-side firms. Mm-hmm. So I was an analyst basically on the sell side for 9 years. Okay. And it was in my second job that I was able to get in the mutual fund side of the business. We developed a family of mutual funds, and I helped start up this. In this case, it was a technology fund which got renamed Small Cap Growth Fund. How did I do it? A lot of luck, a lot of help from my associates, and a lot of basically work. We'll underline luck, but hopefully my background allowed the luck to happen. And I'll say something trite. You make your own luck. There's serendipity in one's life, but basically you make the serendipity too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Roger. It's Omar. So I have a question about like the career side. Finding a job is as hard as it is, and Wall Street specifically very hard. So coming out of Wharton, maybe you had a head start from like other schools in the US.
That's fair.
As hard as it is, sometimes you can't land the job straight out of college in the firm you want, in the big firms, in the big investment banks. So do you think we should, if in case we don't get the jobs we want, like focus on the investment side in smaller firms than try to escalate, or what would you suggest?
There's no particular magic about differentiating between small and large firms. Think of it this way. In a large firm, you will tend to be far more specialized in your job description, which may be good or may be bad. Depends. Why? Because you've got, 500 other people, and job specialization is natural amongst a firm with 500 people. A firm with 10 people, you tend to be a chief cook and bottle washer. You wear lots of hats just by necessity. It may include working in the back office, for a while, processing trades or handling accounts, et cetera. There are advantages to both, and there are disadvantages to both. Let's put it this way. Getting your foot in the door for that first job is key. You can always, eventually you may get that call from the headhunter because you have developed your network and your skill set, and you become more known. But the first order of business is getting that first relevant job, no matter where it is, as long as it's in your field of interest. That's your stepping stone. You need to get that first stepping stone. So big or large, to my mind, there are advantages to both, but get that first job, get your foot in the door.
So relevance is key.
Yes, and that's starting your resume, your real life resume. College life isn't real life.
Thank you.
I have one more question, Mr. Roger. So, according to you, what are the business characteristics and financial characteristics of a good undervalued stock?
Oh boy. Everyone will have a different definition of an undervalued stock. In the last 10 years in the stock market, a high PE stock has been undervalued. So therefore, a PE ratio isn't necessarily a measure of valuation. In the last 10 years, a stock with a nice dividend yield may have been called a value stock, but it's been a terrible performer. So it depends what market you're in, what are the characteristics of the overall stock market, as to what is a relevant definition of value, what is a relevant definition of growth. You see classic PE ratios every day. They're at all-time highs, 23 times earnings. They haven't been there. The last time they were there was a big market crash coming. Well, I don't know what the market's going to do tomorrow. Do I think it's overvalued today? Yeah. Did I think it was overvalued 3 years ago? Yes. Currently, in my personal portfolio, by virtue of my age, I'm more in, and the fact that I don't have a salary anymore, current income is a priority for me. I have stopped rolling the dice a long time ago. It was fun. Fortunately, I was pretty good at it. So my personal investment goals are very different today than they were, but that wasn't your question. What is a value stock? It's in the eye of the beholder in reality. You guys, Leo, were any of these people involved in the PACCAR write-up?
I beg your pardon?
Were any of these folks in the PACCAR, did the PACCAR write-up?
Yeah, Hitali. She was in the Picard group. Yes.
I'm somewhat familiar with that name. I'm dangerous, let's put it that way. But I was listening to, I spent a lot of time on YouTube and various broadcast programs from various services. And they happened to have one of their analysts talk about PACCAR. And it was actually one of his favorite stocks. And this was somebody who's been following the industrial area for about 20 years. So he's been following the trucking industry for a long time. And he was recommending the stock. Why was he recommending the stock? Basically 2 reasons. And I didn't read your report in detail, but the format of the report, which Leo and I have discussed. I think it's a very appropriate format for any report that you guys write. Two reasons. One, the trucking cycle or replacement cycle is favorable.
Mhm.
Two, historically, PACCAR's margins have been depressed because their competition has been extremely price competitive. And for various reasons, their two big competitors have decided to implement more rational pricing. Therefore, historically, even though PACCAR was a very well-managed company, its return on investment was depressed because of industry pricing metrics. And those industry pricing metrics are starting to disappear. Therefore, PACCAR's return on investment on rising earnings will be rising, and that's a wonderful combination. That's all I know about PACCAR.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I have some more if you don't. All right, don't be shy. But I can ask, I can ask another question because I got 12 over here. Another question is that it's about working with smart people, Roger. So this is, I think, particularly relevant to students who are working in big firms at the beginning of their career. So I'm working hard, but I'm afraid it takes more than that to be noticed. What do you think?
A lot of smart people in this world, and there are a lot of smart, dumb people in this world. You know, in various firms, you may have some geniuses, but those geniuses may not be very effective employees. And therefore, even though you may not be a genius, you can easily compete against those people. And again, it's differentiating. Remember, I said that you are always in sales from this day forward. Remember that. Geniuses probably aren't very good salespeople. They may not be very good communicators, and they may have unique personalities. So don't be daunted by a quote smart person. You guys and gals are smart too. And you may be smarter in many ways than that quote genius. So don't be afraid of geniuses. And you can compete against geniuses, so to speak.
All right, thank you, Roger. And I'll just ask one more question given our time window here, but I think this question is actually important for both our presentations during the program, but also for their career. So how do I impress the interviewer? When you're interviewing, basically, that's the question. How do I impress the interviewer?
One, part of the way you impress an interview is by your preparation. You know, if you're going to be more than likely that the company you're interviewing has a website that's probably standard. There's lots of public information about that company. Demonstrating in the interview that you have done a tremendous amount of homework on the company you're interviewing with, and kind of slipping in some of that homework information into the interviewing process, maybe through questions or maybe through observations, shows that you are very interested in that company. Going into an interview just sort of, lackadaisical, not having done a lot of homework on that company and as much homework as you could do on that specific job and that specific department, shows that you are not only interested in working for the company, but you're really interested because you've decided to spend a lot of time doing your homework. So demonstrating that homework and maybe some key questions, maybe some big picture questions, is really important to my mind to differentiate yourself. So generally speaking, homework works.
Right. Anyone has any more questions? Go ahead.
I have a question. I have one question. I'm Julian. You say you watch like YouTube channels. What channels like specifically do you watch? Like about when you mentioned Packard, you said you got the you got like the info watching like a YouTube.
Could you repeat that? You were kind of breaking up.
Yes. So when you talked about Packard, you
Yeah.
mentioned you got the info from a YouTube channel from
Yeah.
an expert.
Yeah.
So I was asking about the YouTube, like.
Oh, this was there's a sell side firm based in Connecticut called Hedgeye, hedgeye.com. Hedgeye is a subscription service. Hedgeye has about 20 fundamental analysts. Hedgeye's focus is a trading focus, and that's how I got really trading and timing focus. And they do a lot of work on sectors and which sectors and where the economy is going, et cetera, informs their trading. They have, as I said, 20 fundamental analysts who do the homework and interface with the buy side analysts who may be dedicated to the industrial sector. It's a subscription service. And periodically they'll send out teasers of some higher level of their subscription service, giving you a flavor of, wanting you to, instead of spending $39 a month, you get to listen to an analyst for $80 a month. And they happen to have one of these teaser ads or teaser presentations on Packard. So it's just serendipity that you guys wrote it up, and I happen to have heard some fresh information or relatively fresh information on the name. So it was just pure coincidence. What I could do, I'd be happy to make a list of some of the websites and YouTubes that I listen to on a regular basis. Today I'm retired, but I probably spend about 4 or 5 hours a day just learning through various websites and people that I've become familiar with over time. And these websites will range from sort of macro stuff all the way down to micro stuff. I'm still a neophyte when it comes to crypto, but I know some crypto sites that, and more than likely, given you are young folks, crypto is going to be something you're probably going to be asked about. So if you're not playing the game on crypto, get familiar with it, because all young kids are supposed to be crypto experts.
Yeah, we are supposed to involve some fintech in our future curriculum, so maybe that can be a future conversation. I am already reaching out to a couple of crypto firms in New York to schedule a potential speech next semester.
That'd be fun.
We're at the end of the hour. I want to respect Roger's time, and everyone, please thank Roger. And Roger, thank you very much again for joining us today. I will stop recording now, and we look forward to having you again.
Great. Well, it's been fun for